Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome USGLC board member Steve Morrissey.
Let's thank Secretary Armando and Liz Schreier again. Good morning, everyone. My name's Steve Morrissey. I'm Vice President for Regulatory Affairs and Policy at United Airlines, and I'm honored to serve as a member of on USGLC's board. Show of hands, how many people traveled from outside Washington to be here today? And how many have traveled beyond our borders in the last year? Very impressive. You are leaders. Thank you for your action and your leadership. So I work in a business that connects people to markets and economies around the world. In fact, at United, we have a saying, our shared purpose is to connect people and unite the world. So we live the mantra that America's success is tied to our engagement beyond our borders. The strength of our economy, the resilience of our supply chains, and our ability to innovate and compete all depend on relationships and partnerships that we build globally, truly global engagement. So we're going to continue the conversation on American prosperity in the next session. We're going to explore how America competes, how America wins through strategic investments in diplomacy, international assistance, technology, and AI. Our guests will examine the evolving landscape of economic security, critical minerals and supply chains, the vital role that global engagement, global leadership plays in supporting American jobs, innovation, and competitiveness. So the slate of leaders we have joining us for the discussion on American prosperity are Sasha Baker, sorry, my Massachusetts came out there. Sasha Baker is the head of national security policy at OpenAI and previously served as the deputy and acting undersecretary of defense for policy at the U.S. Department of Defense. Heather Kulp serves as a vice president of government affairs at Chevron, and she's a fellow USGLC board member. Sam Kwon, general counsel of the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, USTDA, and to moderate the conversation, USGLC Senior Director, Sidney Traynham. Heather, Sasha, Sam, and Sidney, please join me.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Secretary Armando. Sam, Sasha, Heather, welcome. We're going to just get right in, dig into the conversation. Want to pick up on this theme that we've been talking about of economic security is national security. And one of the ways that we often talk about it, maybe too singularly, is that we focus only on maybe the defensive tools of sanctions, tariffs, export controls, but we've got to also play offense. If we want to win, we got to be on the playing field. And so, Sam, you're at USTDA. I want to come to you first on this question of playing offense, because you all are literally on the front lines, leading the way. And so when we think about economic security as national security, why is it so critical that we're also playing offense?
Thank you, Steve. If you put it that way, offense and defense, showing up is half the battle, as they say. So we show up, and USTDA shows up early. Just a quick aside, U.S. Trade and Development Agency has been given the congressional mandate to promote U.S. private sector in development projects with high U.S. export potential. That's our mandate. And then we go in at the very early stages of project preparation, providing grants for feasibility studies and other related technical assistance. And when we show up, if we don't show up, then someone else will show up.
Sure.
And I think that's one of the nature of the battle that we're in, is who gets to show up first, who gets to set the agenda, who gets to specify the specs for the infrastructure that'll be developed, who gets to set the rules about procurement. And I think that's why an entity like USTDA can be useful as a tool. I do want to add, just in light of Secretary Raimondo's comments, metaphors do have a way of locking us into a certain way of thinking. So when I hear offense, defense, I'm an Eagles fan. I think we're going up against Cowboys or something like that. Maybe that's the wrong team to pick in this audience. Having said that, I think there's a slightly different way of thinking about it, which is we bring something different than what the other side might bring. So I'm actually doing some training in our agency on project finance for our staff because that's my background. One thing that I looked up just for that purpose was how much did China spend on Belt and Roads over the last 13 years? Roughly something less than $2 trillion. And I was about to tell our staff that the global debt market right now is around $350 trillion. Equity market's probably half that. So I think what TDA brings to the project developers is we don't just bring U.S. solutions and U.S. money, but we will help you put it together in a way that attracts the private sector capital more than anything else. I think that's compelling to our partners.
I want to dig in on that more. Sasha, I want to come to you next. I promise not to ask you about the OpenAI IPO. We can say that for another day. But you have really unique experience and want to just start, you've served at the Pentagon, you've served at the White House, in Congress, and this idea of economic security as national security increasingly it's interconnected, it's inseparable. But I want to add one more layer to it, and that is the pace of change, of how things are just truly accelerating. I'll pick on OpenAI for a second. I think in the last 5 months, you've released 4 new models. I can't keep up.
Neither can I. Don't feel badly about that.
But this idea of economic security is national security, and we cannot separate them. The pace of the change of that at the same time. Yeah. Help us unpack it. What do we need to be thinking?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. I spent most of my career in government, and part of the reason I am where I am right now is for exactly the reasons that you just described. There is really no field, in my view, right now that more embodies the need for treating economic security and national security as intertwined than what we're seeing in AI, because the same models and the same capabilities that are going to drive productivity, economic growth for us here in the United States and around the world are the same models and capabilities that have real strategic significance from a national security perspective. And those two things cannot really be decoupled at this point. And to your point, the pace of development is such that every week there's a new model that has outpaced the model before. We just had one of our models, I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, solve a math problem that hadn't been solved in, I think it was like 70 years. And they did it for, an amount of tokens that was like maybe $1,000. I mean, just absolutely stunning results. When you think about the implications of that, the thing that I always come back to is the countries that figure out how to harness this technology for their purposes are going to have a tremendous advantage over those that don't.
Great. Heather, let me come to you. There is no secret there's a lot of disruption in the energy markets in the Middle East. But I want to zoom out and talk about your role in the private sector and Chevron's role and how you interact, with the State Department, how you interact with the U.S. government, and how we keep America's economy number one in the world. We used to talk about the private sector role maybe through the lens of CSR, maybe a decade ago, and corporate social responsibility. And it's just so different now in terms of how the private sector is literally a force multiplier on the front lines in terms of U.S. leadership. And so from your view, what are we getting right in this 21st century? What are we, where are some areas we need to improve or strengthen? And where do you see the trend lines in terms of partnership with the State Department, partnership with some of the other agencies?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to go back, though, to the energy security, the national security and economic security. Please. And I just also want to underline that none of that's possible without energy security, right? We all know that nothing if nothing that 150 plus years of global development has taught us, it's that you need affordable, reliable, ever-present energy, right? And for that, you need governments to help set those conditions, right? And so you need governments to help you as a company find access, manage some of the on-the-ground risk for you. You need that diplomacy. You need that development, right? And if you have those fundamental building blocks, then the private sector will come, right? If you build it, they will come. In this case, if you create the conditions, investment follows, right? And so we need that partnership. And I have to say, I'm so thrilled with this administration because they have proven over and over again to really understand that they are the fundamental building blocks and that they need to be partners with the private sector in order to create these conditions. And so I think when you ask, what do we need? We need access, right? We need to level the playing field. This administration really understands that fundamentally and has been doing a great job. And then we need development partnerships, right? We need stable workforces. We need healthy workforces. And I think the current news shows why that's still an ongoing concern around the world, right? We need health systems that are going to create healthy work populations. We need economies that are going to buy our products, right? And then finally, we really need stability, right? In terms of investments, in terms of commercial contracts, all of that. We can't do that as a private sector, right? That's where the government comes in.
Sam, let me come back to you and really get into the strategic competition that we're in, largely with China, but also certainly other players, Russia, other rivals. And you started to talk about the work you do at USTDA. But I actually think USTDA is maybe one of the best kept secrets in Washington. I'm going to get the number, I want to get the number right, but for every dollar that you all invest, it returns $226 in terms of U.S. exports. And that's beyond crazy in terms of ROI. And so I want to hear, what are partner countries that where you all are on the front lines? What do they actually need? What do they actually want from partners like the United States? What do they want from China? What do they maybe want from Russia? And you started to talk about it, but want to go a little deeper of, what is our strategic advantage that we're bringing to the table? And how does that connect back to small businesses and back to American companies in terms of creating jobs?
Yes, there's a lot of questions in there, Barry.
Go for it.
Which one should I start with?
Well, once you start with,
to answer the ones you
you get to pick. But what are countries looking for? What do they want from partnerships with the United States?
Yes. So we make grants to both public grantees, foreign country governments, national, subnational, otherwise, as well as private sector companies that are trying to do projects in developing and middle income countries. To be very blunt, and I have about a third of my career was in the private sector, they're looking for money. Mm-hmm. Because early project preparation money for pre-feasibility, feasibility, conceptual design, 30% design, front-end engineering and design, those things are risky because you do feasibilities to figure out whether something should or shouldn't go. And if you can get some grants into that, then your rate of return dramatically increases. So they're looking for money, but they're also looking for a couple other things. The reason they come to us is because we are the U.S. government or a part of it. And when the U.S. government engages, they feel comfortable. They feel like there's a trusted partner. And then finally, we bring still top quality innovation. AI is one area. Whenever there's data related work or cybersecurity related work, if it's a civil construction in West Africa for a power plant, U.S. companies are not competitive, nor, in my view, should they be. That may not be the right projects for U.S. companies. But if we're talking about, say, full stack development that has, and my son just began studying computer engineering, so he's been teaching me all these terms, like front end, back end, SQL database. What's kind of interesting in here is, and I'm going to come back to Heather's point, when I heard full stack, I didn't know what my son was talking about. But then my mind actually went to, hey son, it's not just that. you need data centers, and you need energy, and you need undersea cable. There's a stack that goes beyond your full stack to make this work. And that's the kind of thing that US can bring, and TDA is part of that. So that's one. I will speak about the small businesses a little bit, just to wrap my point. I learned today, as I was learning about talking points for this talk, that we actually work with small businesses in 380 communities in the US. And that's jobs back in the US. And TDA straddles that interesting line between development, export that leads to jobs. So that's where we think we can add value.
If you could share, I remember you had shared with me before that when you all are working with a particular country, you don't have to name the country, but the country's like, if you will do a deal with us, we'll tear up this agreement we have with China.
Yeah.
Why are they so hungry to want to work with us instead of Beijing?
I think there's two elements to it. One, we do bring better, more reliable, sometimes more advanced technology. So in telecommunications, we've seen that. Two, and I'm going to go back to the first point I made in my first talk. This relates to a rare earth minerals project in sub-Saharan Africa, where our partner grantee said, yeah, if you help us, we will walk away from our relationship with this China where we have an NDA. And that's because
they told you about the NDA.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not uncommon for these, miners or juniors to have NDAs with everybody because they want the money to develop their products because mining majors won't touch them because it's not profitable enough for them. And in that sense, the reason they wanted it is because what we were going to bring was not just U.S. technology, which there was an angle on that, but it was U.S. government's way of preparing projects. We were going to help them formalize or bring into formal economy informal artisanal miners, for example. What that does, even though initially it's more cost and more work and more time, it'll allow them to access certain monies that they couldn't otherwise. It gives them options.
Sure.
And I think that's attractive to them.
Heather, let me come to you. Your role, maybe before you came to Chevron in DC, was working on this Niger Delta initiative as part of Chevron, where you all were really investing in human capital, investing in the community where Chevron operates. And as we think about, how the U.S. engages, specifically on issues like food security and global health, why are those kinds of investments so critical, not just from the private sector, but also from the United States, for you to be able to operate, for you to be able to go into countries and be competitive and to compete with others?
I mean, frankly, you need healthy, educated consumers, right? You need people that are able to participate in the global economy, to buy U.S. products, to support the jobs here. And also locally, you need communities to feel like they are getting a benefit from the projects that are being built in their backyards, right? And so for a company like Chevron, we really think about, we're capital intensive. We're not labor intensive. We don't hire large numbers of people, despite I think what people think. So how do you spread the benefits of a project, an oil and gas project, to the communities? Well, it's looking at other sectors that would maybe become those drivers of economic wealth, become drivers of employment. So for the Niger Delta, we're one of the largest investors in agriculture. And you might think, why are you doing agriculture? Well, because it makes sense in that economy. It can absorb a large number of jobs and and we've been able to create a lot of medium-sized businesses, right? We're not talking about subsistence agriculture. We're talking about businesses that are actually employing people. And that helps create a stable workforce. It helps create a stable community. It helps create a community and a government where they really feel like you are partnering for their success. And when you create that shared success model, then you're able to really say, okay, then what's next, right? Then how do we continue this together? And the U.S. government's been really important in that effort because they were a co-funder of ours, right? We didn't do this alone, right? We can never do this alone. We just are never going to be large enough. So being able to look at, okay, what do you need? What are those fundamental building blocks of how you create stability in your communities? How do you help spread the wealth and create a shared partnership? And then how do you do that in lockstep with the US government? And I think that that's been a really important example for us around the world. It significantly cut into the disruption time, right? Which was costing us a lot of money. So it also saves us money in the long run. So, there are all these benefits to doing something that at first glance, I know a lot of people are like, wait, you invest in agriculture, and you partner with the US government in this. But it's really been a model that has proven over more than a decade now to work. And it's also, more importantly, brought in tens of millions of dollars of private sector investment, not ours, other private sector investment into the Niger Delta, an area that traditionally had been looked at as uninvestable.
Sasha, we've started talking about AI. We were talking about Secretary Armando earlier, but want to go a step deeper. There's no question the race is largely with China, but also with others. Your CEO, Sam Altman, has said the U.S. is likely ahead of China when it comes to AI model development, and China is likely maybe very ahead in other areas like energy or robotics. There's probably little disagreement that there's this imperative for America to win the AI race, but there are lots of thoughts about how we get there, and maybe not complete agreement about the opportunities, about the risks. And so I want to get your view of how do we get AI right as part of our national security? How do we get it right in terms of empowering our diplomats and integrating AI at the State Department, at the Department of War and our military personnel? How do we get that right? But also just the broader, engagement between U.S. AI companies and the U.S. government.
Yeah. Look, when I think about AI competition, I tend to think of it in sort of three buckets. The first bucket being who has the best models, the most capable models. And that's what I think gets a lot of the attention in the media and otherwise. And there, I think Sam is absolutely right. We do have a lead. I will just maybe footnote there, though, that lead is highly dependent on talent. And our talent is international. So when you look at our company, we have not even the 1%, like the 0.001% of machine learning academics and researchers in the world all working in our lab and in our peer labs out in San Francisco. And that is highly sensitive to U.S. immigration policy and a number of dynamics where we are really reliant on the government to continue to allow us to attract the best talent, which is what enables us to then have the most capable models. But there's a second category of this competition, and I think we've sort of referenced it a little bit already, but it's about who is able to have the broadest deployment of their AI stack. And that's relevant, I think, to all of us in this room, because we want countries to be using our semiconductors, our chips, our models, our data centers, and ultimately to be using models that are democratically oriented, that don't exhibit bias, that have strong safety guardrails. And that's good, of course, for us as a company, but it's good, I think, for the broader ecosystem as well. And so that is a very robust area of competition. And, to Heather's point, we can't do that alone. We need those investments from the government to come along with us, because the act of building that infrastructure, everything from the cables to the data centers to the actual model itself just being sort of the tip of the iceberg, is really expensive. And so there needs to be, I think, a strong partnership there between industry and government. And then the third area of competition that I always like to talk about, and I think it's worth more than a footnote, is who is managing the risk around AI most successfully? And there's lots of areas of risk, right? We can talk about the impacts to labor and to the workforce and how we sort of manage to have a transitional economy that works for the maximum number of people. We've written a lot on that topic at OpenAI on our policy team. But the area that I focus on is national security risk. And I worry a lot about whether AI, the things that Secretary Raimondo said keep her up at night also keep me up at night. I have a 3-year-old, not a 19-year-old. He also keeps me up at night. But the potential for democratizing knowledge is amazing. And that is a huge opportunity, I think, for the US and for the world. But that same knowledge, there is another side to it, right? That you could democratize access to knowledge about bio weapons or cyber attacks, et cetera. And so it's really incumbent on us as a company to make sure that we're putting in place what we call our safety stack that prevents against those kinds of opportunities. And again, this is an area where we partner really closely with the government because we have the world-leading experts on how to elicit capabilities from the models, but they don't know anything about terrorism or chemical warfare or, pick your scary topic. And so we need that threat intelligence from the government side to help us know what we should even be protecting against. And I spend a lot of my time working on that. But to your point, I said this earlier, I think the countries that are successful in integrating AI capabilities into their workflows and really transforming how they do business, whether that's at the Department of State, and we've worked with the State Department on, they have a ambassador bot that they've created that basically allows for locally employed staff to practice briefing their ambassador based on that ambassador's particular style and preferences in advance of the meeting with the ambassador, because this is like a pain point for a lot of embassies where the local staff, I think, is very concerned about getting it right, and you often have new ambassadors coming in, they have to learn new styles. So they've created basically a model on top of ChatGPT that allows for those kinds of practice opportunities, which I think is super cool. We're working famously, this was on the front page of every newspaper, with the Department of War. We're really excited about the opportunity space there and the idea that we can do more to enable the men and women of our military to protect themselves and come home safely. And that's something that, has driven a huge chunk of my career. And then we're also working in the humanitarian space. And here, we have a partnership with the Gates Foundation where we are working to enable, by 2028, 1,000 clinics in Africa, primarily in Rwanda, that are AI enabled. Not that there's no need anymore for medical professionals, of course there is, but to allow those professionals to reach a greater scale of the population via our tools. So there's I think a lot of really exciting stuff happening, but I think you're hearing from all of us, it has to be integrated between industry and government.
Great. I want to shift gears. It's still in the AI space, but really focus for a moment on critical minerals and the race, the strategic competition to access these critical minerals. We've been putting a spotlight as USGLC on how is international assistance, a critical part of America's critical mineral strategy. How do these investments help accelerate our access to critical minerals? And Sam, I'm going to come back to you. And Liz mentioned at the beginning of today the libido corridor. Could you help us be smart and just break down, what is the libido corridor? How are we engaging? How are we investing to help accelerate access to critical minerals, but also these wraparound investments in health, in food security that are really critical to ensuring our success and our ability to win?
If we can pull up the Google map, and if you picture the continent of Africa, you start from, say, Zambia, then go out to DRC, to Angola. That's your libido corridor. It's in that area. Mm-hmm. We talk about Sahel region. That's the libido corridor. And you started out with critical minerals. That's because in those parts are significant deposits of certain critical minerals and a subset of rare earth elements, which are also very difficult to get at a reasonable price. And U.S. government has made that a priority. And then U.S. government is investing in transport infrastructure, energy infrastructure, critical minerals infrastructure, so that those deposits can come out and then go to the places where they're needed, while also developing and helping develop those countries. So that's the biggest picture. For TDA, we are everywhere. We were involved in the rail development. We are involved in critical minerals projects in, say, Zambia. We have a pipeline right now of about 9 critical minerals projects, 7 of which are focused in sub-Saharan Africa. Now that is strictly the doings of this administration in the sense that we weren't as focused, but it has become very clear that that's where the White House wants us to focus.
Sure.
And we've been focusing, and we believe there will be a series of projects that'll come out of it that's going to strengthen U.S. ability and security over these valuable deposits. And then in addition, we do related investments there. There's energy infrastructure that we're looking at, and there's port security infrastructure so that when these goods and services move through that corridor to the ports on the Atlantic coast of Africa, there's right infrastructure to send it to where it's needed. So those are the ways in which USTDA is engaging.
Great. Sasha, let me come back to you. And, part of the race on critical minerals is not just so we share in these resources in partner countries, but these partner countries are also potential customers for the full American tech stack. And would love to hear from you just where is OpenAI engaged in Indo-Pacific, in Africa and Latin America, in helping to enable AI for how these countries are operating. We think about, maybe a decade ago, the idea of leapfrogging. The countries would, they're not doing landlines, they're not doing a grid, they're going straight to solar, they're going straight to 5G. Are we seeing leapfrogging in the AI space of how countries are accelerating forward, and how is OpenAI part of that equation as we think about these partner countries, particularly ones with critical minerals?
Yeah, well, I think the short answer is we're in all of those places that you just described. And we have an initiative as a company that we call OpenAI for Countries. And what that's really about is figuring out what the value proposition is for a given country that we want to be able to operate in, so that we're not just exporting our technology and then wiping our hands of it and saying over to you, but that there is actually an opportunity to build an enduring partnership. And in each country, that looks different, right? Some countries are interested in partnering with us in the national security space. Other countries, we just announced, actually, I think it was earlier this week or maybe last week, that we, as part of our OpenAI for Countries for Malta, have given ChatGPT accounts to every citizen of Malta. It turns out there are not that many people who are citizens of Malta, so it's less expensive maybe. But we're looking to try to enable government's priorities on behalf of the people that they represent, and that is really critical to us, and it's a key pillar of our efforts. And it is the case, I think, that AI can allow countries, particularly in the global south, in the developing world, to leapfrog generations of technology and get ahead in a way that might not have been possible before you had this technology that really does have a democratizing impact in terms of allowing anyone in the world with a connection to the internet to have access to all of the knowledge that exists.
Great. Want to wrap up here with just one final quick question for each of you. Sam, one of the coolest things that USTDA does are these reverse trade missions. And we've got a lot of small business leaders here in the room. Unpack what you guys do. How does it work? And how does it help us win and compete in ways that we may not realize?
In a trade mission, you bring U.S. solutions to the country. In a reverse trade mission, we bring the potential buyers and end users of U.S. technology and goods and services to the U.S. and then have them meet up with U.S. companies, policymakers, other government institutions, and industry leaders so that they can learn and see those technologies and solutions in action. And they have a great track record of leading to exports. So that's what we do.
Very cool. Sasha and Heather, let me come to you both. Just want to get your big picture takeaway from this conversation, the conversation with Secretary Raimondo. You all have tens of thousands of employees in the United States. You have millions of customers that buy your products. Why is it, in your view, maybe in a personal way, just so critical that America is out there, that Team USA is out there to ensure that we win and that your companies are successful and that we deliver jobs back here at home? Sasha, I'll go to you and then to you, Heather.
Sure. Well, first of all, we actually don't have tens of thousands of employees.
I'm wrong. Okay.
You might believe, we get kind of referenced in the same sense as Google and Microsoft and all of the big guys, but We're
We're
actually still quite small in terms of numbers. Having said that, we are an American company, a very proudly American company, and from Sam Altman on down, we've been very clear about that. And so when we show up in the world, we're showing up as an American company. And so everything that's happening geopolitically in the world then has an implication for us as a business. And we get that feedback from governments and from enterprise customers around the world that they are watching where America is going with technology and reacting to that, and that has an impact on our business. And so that is why it's all the more critical that we work together with the government to shape what that environment looks like.
Great. Heather, last word.
So if you go to national security is economic security. Economic security needs energy security. The U.S. Oil and gas industry employs 10 to 11 million Americans every day. We spend billions and billions of dollars with our supply chain, and that is going to small manufacturers, that's going to small businesses, that's going to companies all across the great United States. You can't do any of that, right, without the partnership of the U.S. government. Right? The U.S. government's going to create the access. They're going to create the conditions through their diplomacy, through their development, through the programs like Sam has been talking about. And that enables all of us to win, right? And that means that America is stronger, and it means that the world ultimately gets stronger. So for me, it has always tied together for Chevron because, we see all of this as the fundamental building blocks to national security. You got to have the energy, and to have that, you got to have the partnership with the government.
Thank you. Thank you to this panel. Thank you all for bringing your stories with us today.